an honour to rise in this debate today. The first thing I'd like to do when in debating the Tariff Malaysia Free Trade Agreement Amendment Bill is to welcome the Minister back to New Zealand from his successful foray into supporting Australian politicians, and I'm sure as the day evolves, we'll be able to see the impact of the Minister's triumphal visit to Australia on the fortunes of the Australian Prime Minister. Yes, and some colleagues have suggested that Mr Gross's visa for the United States has been revoked by Barack Obama for fear of what might happen to him over there. Actually, in all seriousness, Mr Speaker, I would like to congratulate Mr Grosser as the Trade Minister, and indeed in his former career, for the work that he has done around free trade agreements, and this one is particularly one that he's had a bit to do with. Also, former Labour ministers Phil Goff and Jim Sutton, who played a key role in the initial development of the Malaysia Free Trade Agreement. And indeed, Mr Speaker, the many foreign affairs officials who work on these agreements. There's an awful lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, not just, it might be said, by trade negotiators, but also by those who manage the overall relationship between New Zealand and, in this case, a country like Malaysia. The trust that's built up over time is what lies behind an agreement like the Malaysia Free Trade Agreement. We aren't able to make these kinds of quality agreements if we don't have quality diplomats and foreign affairs officials working overseas and negotiating them. So I offer my congratulations and thanks to those foreign affairs officials and indeed officials from other departments and agencies who've been involved in this particular agreement. This is a highly significant agreement. It's also a high-quality agreement as well as free trade agreements go. Malaysia is a significant country, as other speakers have noted, for New Zealand trade. Between 2004 and 2008, there was an 80% increase in New Zealand exports going into Malaysia, and in 2008, our exports were worth nearly $1 billion. So that is it's a significant trading relationship for New Zealand, and one that is obviously growing. It is a high-quality agreement, Mr Speaker, in the sense that 95% of the tariffs that are being reduced will come into force on the day of agreement. So that's excellent. 99.5% by 2016. That's 5 years earlier than the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement has. So this is an improvement in quality. It's a step forward in terms of how our trade agreements are progressing. And a conservative estimate would tell us that there's probably $10 million per annum benefit just in the tariff changes. So this really is an agreement which will benefit exporters. It's high quality. It has the elements of a free trade agreement that we're used to. It takes into account services as well as goods, and I don't think we always give as much attention to the importance of the services side of these free trade agreements. A lot of successful New Zealand businesses are involved in the services sector, perhaps as well as in the exporting of goods, but this is a high quality agreement in terms of services as well as in terms of core exports. My colleague Marion Street, I think, has already talked about the importance of the kiwi fruit sector, and clearly the removal of the tariff there is going to make a huge difference for Zespri, and I know that they and some of our other large exporters have also played a key role in this agreement. Also, it binds in the existing duty-free access for New Zealand dairy. Dairy is usually a problem for us in our free trade agreements, but it's good to see that in this agreement we've managed to put a situation in place where we bind in what is already a good situation and hopefully improve it as we go ahead. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about two elements that sort of round this agreement, having outlined the fact that obviously Labor supports this bill, we support the free trade agreement, and we recognise the quality of it. Free trade agreements need to be seen as part of our overall economic approach. And I think my colleague Jacinda Ardern's already addressed the question of monetary policy and the fact that it is important to talk about what we can do better in terms of monetary policy. We have had a consensus in that area, but the question many exporters raise with me and with other colleagues is whether or not that balance of monetary policy is right in terms of supporting the exporters who are a key part of this free trade agreement. Those exporters are worried about the volatility of exchange rates. They're concerned that the monetary policy focus we currently have is too narrow, and I do think when we look at free trade agreements we need to look at it alongside the rest of what we're doing. We also need to look at it alongside domestic policy. actually how are we encouraging and supporting exporters? What kind of regional development plans do we actually have? What is the plan for growth and for jobs in New Zealand? Are we creating the skilled population, the productive population that will actually be able to take advantage of an agreement like this? Where is the government skills strategy? Why isn't the government encouraging more people into tertiary education rather than actually shutting the doors on people going into tertiary education? Because free trade agreements are fantastic and give a deliverable to New Zealand. But if New Zealand is to take advantage of those agreements, it needs the infrastructure behind it. We need the infrastructure behind that in terms of how the economy is organised, how we have a skilled and productive workforce, how innovative ideas are able to be supported and taken forward. And the government is very proud of this bill, as it should be, but we need to ask the question, where is the overall economic plan to deliver high-quality jobs, to support people who have the skills and to give people new skills to make sure that they can contribute to this free trade agreement and to growing the New Zealand economy. The other element that I want to raise, Mr. Speaker, is around what are called the side agreements to this free trade agreement. In particular, in this case, as has been in a number of recent free trade agreements, the Environmental Cooperation Agreement and the Labour Cooperation Agreement. These have become a feature of recent bilateral free trade agreements for New Zealand, and I think that's an extremely positive thing. For some time, around the beginning of the century, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and others were very reluctant to negotiate these environment and labour cooperation agreements, and some of our partner countries were also clearly reluctant. But they have now become a regular feature, and they do offer a very important alternative and a very important different track for our relationships with these countries. And I've just come back from China with a Wellington City delegation there, and one of the main things that was being raised with us as a delegation was how can we work together in terms of environmental cooperation. The Chinese, and I'm sure the Malaysians as well, were very interested in renewable energy. They were very interested in fresh water management. They were very interested in a range of environmental issues, air quality, where New Zealand has some expertise and knowledge, and they obviously also have a great deal of expertise and knowledge. And I do believe that these environmental cooperation agreements in particular are a real opportunity for New Zealand, and I do hope the government will not just see these as a tack-on, put on to the end of the agreement to placate people, but rather as an opportunity to actually grow our relationship with countries that are developing at an enormously fast rate, which is putting huge pressure on their environment. And here's an opportunity for us. We've got the framework. Let's use it. Let's make it a key part of our relationship, in this case with Malaysia, but indeed with all the countries that we have free trade agreements with. And the same actually goes for labour cooperation agreements. And the labour cooperation agreements have sometimes been even more controversial because they cut to labour standards issues, issues about wages, health and safety. In China, major issues at the moment, Foxconn facing huge issues with its workforce, having massively increased the wage bill, but still having major issues. We have a lot to be able to offer countries around a cooperative model of labour relations, around the importance of health and safety. So I just urge, Mr. Speaker, in closing, that this is a high-quality agreement, but there are also side agreements that offer huge opportunity for New Zealand to broaden and deepen our relationships, in this case with Malaysia and with other countries that we have a free trade agreement with. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to support this bill. Free trade is not the be-all and end-all of our economic relationships, but it is an important part of driving our economic growth and improving our relationships with countries in our region.